If you take your glasses off now, you're going to go completely blind. Are you blind now? Because I just had mine on before we started and took them off, and I can see nothing but just like things floating in front of me. It'll all calm down in a minute.
Yeah. These are my I had to get a new pair of burners this morning.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No, I haven't lost mine in a while. I just seem to be getting blinder. What?
250.
Yeah. I'm sure you're not supposed to be slamming phones down on the table while you're recording a podcast, are you?
We are recording, are we?
We are recording, yes.
I'm surely aware of that.
We certainly are. Aren't you very lucky you didn't
I am.
Anyway, we're recording because we were looking at a story this week about the wife of Nathan McDonnell, who is forever going to be known as the Breaking Bad businessman. He was obviously the Tralee garden centre owner who got caught up heavily with the Sinaloa cartel and ended up getting 12 years, I think, in prison for his involvement in their efforts to ship €32 million worth of crystal meth to Australia from Ireland. Now, his wife, Jackie O'Duffy McDonnell, who was a sort of like an influencer, a very well-known individual, certainly in the Kerry area. Her and Nathan would have been, always photographed when out and about. They would have been socialites. They would have been seen in all the right places at all the right times. And their lifestyle might have been envied by many. But when you look at how things have collapsed for them, Jackie O'Duffy McDonnell was only recently stopped while driving, or on suspicion at least of driving under the influence of cocaine. Now, the samples have been sent to a laboratory which are going to take, they can take anything up to 2 weeks to come back. But the suspicion is that at 2 p.m. on a Saturday in Tralee, she failed a roadside intoxicant test and had been stopped by gardaí at that point. So things are not looking good there at all.
Yeah, so it was a routine stop that the guards have been implementing for the last couple of years, where people are not just tested for drink in the old way, but also tested for drugs, basically. Now, when contacted by Pat O'Connell from the Sunday World, she didn't make any comment, and her solicitor ultimately said that they weren't commenting at this time.
Right.
But clearly she was stopped and this sample was taken.
So she's still living in the family home in Tralee?
She's still living in the family home in Tralee.
And she did give an interview, I think, to, was it the Mail on Sunday or the Daily Mail, after his jailing, to say that she was going to stand by him. She loved him. She was 100% in love with him. And she was basically, by his side throughout this. She was going to wait for him kind of to come out of prison sort of thing. And that she thought it was, all that had happened was simply a moment of madness. Now, the judge disagreed with her on that, because during the sentence hearing for Nathan McDonnell, it was sort of found that he wasn't just a cog in the wheel. He had actually, and he wasn't just somebody who had been caught up in a moment. He was somebody who had done quite a lot of he'd taken on quite a few important roles in this attempt to ship the crystal meth from Cork port to Australia. He had booked some of the shipping. He had inveigled companies, and at the end of the day, I think relatives of his in Australia, to sort of accept or to sign off that they were accepting this cargo into their company. I think they were never charged in relation to any of it, were completely innocent, but he did do that. And he also stored the crystal meth at his garden centre for 4 months. I mean, a very trusted role.
Yeah, so some of the things that could be said in mitigation in these cases, and we have seen very significant mitigation at times for people who were under threat, for example, to store drugs, that would be taken into account. But the judge said in Nathan McDonnell's case, there was no proof that he was under duress. That was never provided to the court. Another thing could be if, as you said, the person didn't know what was there. And now Nathan McDonnell did say he didn't know the quantity or the type of drugs, but the court also found that he must have had some knowledge of what was going on, given the people that were involved and the scale of the operation. And he also was set to significantly make a lot of money out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, you have, so at times, have guys coming to court storing millions of pounds worth of drugs, and you hear they're getting 200 or 300 quid. But Nathan McDonnell was set to make, by his own, out of his own mouth, a claim of 150,000, so a huge amount of money.
Well, it was a long period of time he was storing an enormous amount of drugs on his premises. And also, I think the hub of all this, the reason he got involved was, I'm sure there's many reasons for it, but we will break it down sort of slowly as we go forward on a bigger investigation into all this. But he was in debt. His company looked as if it was doing fantastic. People spoke about Ballyseedy Garden Centre rising from the ground like a phoenix from the ashes, you know.
Yeah.
It had been a family business, a small garden centre. His mother had worked very hard at it, and I think had inherited it from maybe her parents or before her. And he had taken it on, and it had just sprung up into one of these huge, big Celtic Tiger sort of ambitious projects, which was a restaurant chain, the garden centre. There was a restaurant at the garden centre. It was a kind of a place, a lifestyle place, really. And, you know, it looked as if they were doing absolutely amazing. But as we heard during his sentence hearing, the opposite was actually the case. He owed something like 2 million to revenue. He was employing a huge amount of people in the Tralee area. But the thing was about to go wallop. So the 150,000 he was promised for his role in, you know, aiding the Sinaloa cartel to ship these drugs to Australia. And the point of this all was to avoid customs out there, because product coming from Ireland wouldn't be red flagged going into Australia. Product coming from Central America and other transport zones for crystal meth would be. So it was very unlikely that anything coming from Ireland was going to be searched or suspected of being that. But the 150,000 he was due to make was really, it wasn't going to solve his monetary problems, his debt problems. It was, and looked as if it was to continue the lifestyle.
Yeah, and so the lifestyle was significant. Now, you remember when Nathan McDonnell was charged then in Tralee, that he was brought to court, and there was a couple of hundred people outside to watch this moment, this kind of, because of his local celebrity, effectively. Now, part of the reason why there was such an interest to him was because he seemed to be living this incredible life in the middle of Tralee that other people could only aspire to. Partly, you know, he was involved in the horse racing business, for example. He was on various afternoon TV shows talking about his business and home improvements. And he had his wife on his arm, a very good-looking, glamorous woman. He was also interacting with these politicians. There was loads of pictures came out straight after he was charged of him with some of the, you know, all the senior figures from Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. So he seemed to live this incredibly envious lifestyle, and his wife was part of that. You know, she would have been, I think, originally from Dublin, but very well known as well in the local community now. Obviously, that all of that made the story hugely interesting. But so he lived this life. He publicly showed off this life. He was on social media, so was his wife. But I think behind it all, you see, it was basically castles of sand that, like people...
Well, he hadn't paid the revenue. So, I mean, that bill was going up and up. And
yeah.
I mean, that's the big bill you need to pay to keep the show on the road. And, you know, the fines and everything that come on top of that. He had 140 people, I think, employed. Yeah. In actual fact, the businesses, receivers moved in and they desperately tried to salvage what they could in order to keep those jobs intact. Because so many people were affected by this, not least his immediate family. And some of them, a sister certainly, or maybe two of his sisters, and his father attended the sentence hearing. And I spoke to his father briefly on the way out, and he sort of felt as if he said, you know, Nathan made his decisions. He decided to do things. This is what happens. Let this be a lesson to anybody else who thinks there's a quick buck and drugs, you know, which I thought was a very sort of honourable thing to have said. And it was almost as if Nathan McDonnell at that point was feeling the same way. Yeah. He was sort of, he pleaded guilty. He was going to suck up his sentence. He was in court with his jaw wired because he had been viciously attacked in Portlaoise prison, a place where he never expected to be, I suppose, when he was head of the Chamber of Commerce and living on the social circuit around the Kerry area and beyond with his wife. But he nonetheless was in there. He was working as a cleaner. It was never really quite worked out whether this was just a kind of personality clash or if there was pressure being put on him as a cleaner, because he'd been moving around the landings, and we all know that transport is one of the biggest assets of any drug gang. And obviously drugs are dealt in prison in the same way as they are on the outside. Was he being put under pressure? Was he refusing? Whatever. He's been a model prisoner, but he sat in that dock that day and he was crushed, and he pleaded guilty, and he looked as if he was going to have to do a sentence. He's 3 young sons who are still living in Kerry. His wife, when she gave her interview, said, "This was not my life plan. God, no, it's a blow. It's what we've been dealt with. That is what it is. I have to think what is best for the boys. The whole thing has been horrific from start to finish. So long as Nathan is okay and the boys are okay, that's all I can hope for." Now, she finds herself in a position that many woman who maybe hasn't lived such a privileged lifestyle finds themselves in when things collapse. You know, the man, the husband, whatever, the father of the children is sent to jail, and you're left without an insurance policy, without a wage, and you just have to, keep going and try and bring up your kids, and then bring your kids into a prison to see their father and try and explain that to them, and I suppose keep them as much on the straight and narrow as possible.
Yes, so of course, when he was being sentenced, you heard all that, the devastating impact of his loss of reputation it had, because he had such a high reputation. But he did, I suppose, describe like the desperate measures he had taken, and he had said that the business, in his own words, was fucked for years, and there was a smell of the incident involving the machine where the drugs were stored, but that his business had effectively spiraled out of control. And his own defence counsel said he hadn't had the business acumen to really run this business, that it had all been that he had been maybe the capacity to generate publicity and attention, but he couldn't actually do the hard bit of the business, which is to manage the money and to manage the expansion, and that that he'd taken the easy route, I suppose, and looked for a bit of money.
It has to be said that this story around the crystal meth, the Sinaloa, the Kerry connection, and all the way back into some EncroChat files we have relating to
Maurice O'Shea
Salazar. It's just such a fascinating story, and we find that people are really very interested in it, and we do plan to do something bigger on this, a little bit more meaty. So I'm going to use this opportunity. Anybody who's listening and interested in this and who knows anything, you can contact me in confidence, absolutely 100%. All my DMs are open. Half the world has my mobile number, so that's not a problem either. Well, if you want to email me, I can send it to you. I'd love to know everything I can about what was happening in the run-up to this. What was happening with this couple, what was happening within the community, what was happening with and what happened to the business afterwards. What happened to the people who were working in that business? Are they still in employment? What sort of effects could all this have had on them? And, we have a trial coming up in the Special Criminal Court where James Lean is also facing charges in relation to this. And that is due to go ahead later this year. So we will hope to cover that in depth. But in the meantime, please get in touch with any information you have. And
people have got in touch since we started covering this story. Now, Nathan McDonnell put forward a particular view of himself in court, as he's entitled to do. And certainly in terms of the business being in trouble, that's all documented fact. His role in the drug dealing operation is documented fact as well, that he wasn't involved in other aspects of the business. But other people have contacted me to say, this idea of Nathan McDonnell making one terrible mistake, that it was a bit more complex, and that although he had the reputation in a business sense in the wider world, that other people found him trickier in other ways as well, and maybe not so clean living.
Well, I mean, it was said in his sentence hearing that he had a problem with cocaine, and he was using cocaine and had problematic with it. So, that is obviously all there in the background. Very sad for the kids if a second parent is at the moment, Jackie O'Duffy McDonnell is making no comment, and obviously there will be, failed roadside intoxicant has to be sent forward for a test. But even to be sort of arrested on suspicion of that is very difficult for the family. Just, it was only months ago that their father was, especially for those children, it was only months ago their father was jailed and got such huge publicity around that. So, look, we'll follow on up for it. As I said, anybody with any information, please contact me and I'll always find time to talk to you.
Thanks, Nicola.
I'm Nicola Tallant and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.